Yes, I know this is a longer episode, but you are going to want to listen to this. We are joined by Larry Wilson, and we are talking about communication tips for everyone. We go deep into how we communicate, how we use our words really can impact others, and how we can use this beautiful method, the Wilson method, to stand up, speak out, and to really communicate what our gifts are with the world, because communication is the greatest gift we have to give. So, you will want to tune in. Larry is amazing, and I'm excited to hear what you think and how you are going to change how you communicate both on your podcasts and in your real life. So, are you ready? Let's go. Welcome to the Cure for Pod Fade. I am so excited you found your way here because that means you know how powerful podcasting can be. You are ready to build a legacy with your unique story, your message, and your offer, but you're getting a little overwhelmed. You're feeling frustrated, you're feeling stuck. You just don't know how to grow your show, find a new audience, and make some money. Podcasting can be the ticket to the life of your dreams, and it doesn't have to be as hard as you think. We're talking about all the ingredients it takes to be a successful, profitable podcaster without that icky overwhelm, because you are too magical to join the 85% plus club that pod fades away. I'm your host, Jen Dragonette, so let's make podcasting easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Remind me of the old days when I would be doing television or radio stuff, and it was going out live. And if there was a techno problem like we had, people would be sweating blood. And then I had to remind myself, no, whenever we get this together, she'll record it, it'll be fine. There's no panic of someone going, we're up on the satellite in 3, 2, what?
Oh, that would be a whole new level of pressure. I couldn't do it.
I don't know how I did it. I guess I just didn't know any better. I just sort of acted like, okay, whatever. But it is interesting because to me, that's what the podcasting is. It's like everyone in the world having their own radio station.
Yeah.
And you don't have the onerous problem of executive producers or networks or something saying, why did you say that? How could you use that word? And I saw a friend of mine who's a very well-known actor, Steve Valentine, who's all over the television and movies and everything else, sent me a recording of an interview from 1959 or 58 of Rod Serling being interviewed by Mike Wallace. And it was
Wow.
really, really, he knew because of my interest in communication. It was unbelievable. And Serling was so eloquent, so well spoken. But he said a really interesting thing that made me think of it just now when I was saying about executive producers. Mike Wallace was asking, have you had any problems with censorship or anything? And Serling said, no, no. He said, the only problem we've had with a sponsor interfering with the content, we had a scene taking place on a British naval destroyer, and the captain calls down to the galley and asks them to send up some tea. And it so happened that the sponsor of the show was Folgers Instant Coffee, and they did not want tea being mentioned. And isn't that crazy? I mean, and Serling was like, you're joking, right? Nope, absolutely not. We do not want. So the compromise they made is they changed the script to read, could you send a tray up? Because he was trying to say British naval officers aren't going to be drinking coffee. I'm sorry, they just won't.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Interesting.
you don't think of stuff like that. Podcasting, you get to do anything you want.
Oh, yeah. That's why I love it. It's you unfiltered.
Yeah. No, that's, and again, I'm glad we're recording because that is, I think, one of the keys. I think that some of your listeners who may be having trouble are filtering themselves too much.
Yeah.
And
100%.
that and that self-consciousness that is the same self-consciousness that makes public speaking the number one fear of Americans. Not death. Death is number two. Number one is public speaking. So that is the same thing as why people are filtering themselves on podcasts, because they're standing outside themselves, listening and looking at themselves and being critical of themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And we just have to put that aside. Don't fight it. Don't try to say, you can't do that. Just sort of go, yeah, okay. And now I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm going to be who I really am. And that is, I think, what makes the most engaging, most compelling podcasting.
Yeah. Ooh,
But
and putting aside all that fear to just be able to speak. I call podcasting for your soul, because I truly believe, yeah, we can use it for business, but it also has been like such a healing tool for me.
oh yeah. Well, now we didn't officially start this broadcast, but I don't care anyway. I'm just going to keep talking because the things you're bringing up, I think, are so pertinent. The idea that it can be healing, I couldn't agree with you more. Because one of the things in Wilson method training that I talk about is, I think one of the worst possible feelings is to feel like you aren't being seen. That horrible feeling of, now, I understand women have a whole special compartment added with that besides men. But men feel it too, just I don't think as much as women are likely to feel it. But that whole feeling of, whether it's someone walks into the room and addresses everyone except you, or you ask a question of someone and they just act like you're there. That's a terrible feeling. That's a horrible feeling. And I think you're absolutely right that one of the things podcasting can do is to begin to heal that, because you feel like, I am heard, I am seen. You see that people are listening to you. And even better, and I think this is something you and I may get into later in this conversation, but there are ways that I think are probably directly correlated to monetizing your podcast to get people more involved and to get them interacting with you and communicating with you at a much higher level. So
Yeah.
I'm not the least bit surprised that you find it to be healing. It's great. It
Yeah.
is really great.
It's definitely part of like my mission on this planet, is to help get people's voices out. And I know that you're an expert in that, in finding that the voice with and how to communicate. And I love, like, when I looked at it, it was something like Stop the Bleeding. That was like the top of your website when I looked at it. And I was like, holy crap, that is exactly what it is. It's like we've bled out all these parts of us. And I feel like we need to let it
I,
in. Like, let's refill.
I may have to hire you, Jen, to be my publicist or something, because to say you get me is a little bit of an understatement. I mean, I'm so pleased that you said that, because when I wrote that, a couple people I know said, "Ooh, I'm not sure if you should say that." I said, "Well, isn't that the way it feels?" They said, "Yeah, but I'm not sure." I said, "Well, as soon as you say yeah, but, then I'm going with it." Because what you just said is, it feels sometimes like we bled all of that energy out. And it's time to stop the bleeding. It really is. Especially, Jen, you're obviously much younger than me. And what a great thing to be much younger than me. But how wonderful that you've grown up in a time when you could do something like podcasting and it's virtually free. I mean, you don't have to book studio time or hire a producer or all these other things that could easily mount into thousands of dollars of production time. That's a really incredible benefit. And I think the reason I was first drawn to this particular podcast, Stop the Pod Fade, was because I kind of felt like you were onto something very important. And it really is, I think, the primary, it sounds like your mission is the same as my mission, which is to connect with people and help them get their voices heard.
Yeah, 100%. That's a hundred. I always tell people, I'm like, if you want to be a ripple, I'm not your person. If you want to be a tsunami of change, I'm your person.
That's also a great image, fantastic image. God, there's so many things we could talk about here, but let me just say in passing, I won't make a big deal about it, but what you just demonstrated there, I think, is a great illustration of the power of vocabulary. Now, I'm sure you think, what? I didn't do anything. Well, you didn't do anything contrived or fake. You did something authentic. But this is particularly important for podcasters to cultivate a, a better vocabulary than we hear in common usage. If you spend 5 minutes with me, you'll know I'm not really judgmental of anyone. If if your whole communication is just grunts and nods and point, that's fine. But my personal experience, the experience I've had in this lifetime, was that the better your communication skills, the more powerful you were. I worked with the biggest stars in entertainment for almost 40 years. I'm among other things, I'm a comedian magician.
That's awesome.
And and so I got this opportunity. I traveled all over the world and I worked with these huge stars. And then frequently, maybe in the last 25 years, once people started to see me on television, other places like that, that's where I was nominated for an Emmy, but also great lesson there. I was beaten by a 12-year-old kid. And I thought,
Ooh.
that's a great lesson to learn not to take this stuff too seriously. I thought, yes, it's very nice to be recognized, but don't take this stuff too seriously. But after I'd been on television for a while, I started getting hired a one-on-one with people in entertainment and show business, television, movies, where somebody needed to speak. Either it was for a role sometimes, or sometimes it was for something, a presentation live in front of a large group or something like that. And very often they had me signing an NDA because they didn't want to make it like their star couldn't do it by themselves. And that's fine. I just consider myself the same as like a mechanic or something. I'm there to tune it up and get it happening. But it was interesting to see, and this was just my experience, that all those people seemed to get everything they wanted out of life. And it's very easy to mistake that, to think it's, oh, because they're so talented. Many of them were enormously talented, but almost all of them relied on technique. And once I started to realize that's what was going on, I thought, oh, this is great news because technique is duplicatable, it's transferable. I can teach technique to anyone. If you speak English well enough to understand me, then I can teach you Wilson method. That's not a problem. If it was talent, I don't know what to, I don't know how to do that. But it's interesting. And what you just demonstrated by the use of the word tsunami, I mean, it's not a 75-cent word. It's not like some impossible word. We hear it all the time. But to be able to use it in conversation the way you did, you have to be expanding your vocabulary consistently. You have to be doing it all the time. And the reason I think it's important is because what you just did, you painted a picture in words that's so much more powerful than just using the word really. Instead of saying, if you're really, really small, then I'm not interested. But if you want to be really, really, really big, then like that's not that interesting. But you said you want to be a ripple? Nah, it's not really my wheelhouse. You want to be a tsunami? I'm the person for it. That paints an incredibly clear picture. And it's not hard. I'm not supposed to be doing this. It's supposed to be your show, but I'm going to put you on the spot. How do you think your vocabulary developed?
Oh, I'm an obsessive learner. So I think that that's part of it. I went to college for 12 years. I'm certified in 7 different healing modalities. I
Well,
I
there
love
you
to
go.
learn. So I think that's part of it.
Well, again, I think you're being modest. I think that's totally it. If you love to learn, then it also means you probably love to read.
No, I
And
hate reading.
oh, you hate reading. Wow. But you were in college for 12 years? Oh my
I was
God.
with graduated with honors, but reading, I've never read for pleasure.
Isn't that wild? I would never have thought that. Well, good for you then. So you were doing it strictly by speaking and listening.
Yeah, I love classes. Right now, I'm an audiobook fanatic. I do buy the book because I like to hold the book while I'm listening to the book. So I kind of follow along, but I'm not a traditional grab a book and read kind of girl.
Isn't that interesting? It's wild. I also love audiobooks. I mean, they're, again, so convenient and especially educational material that you can listen to anytime, even if it's just a piece of it. I guess I like it. It's funny. I like it better than video because just like with a real book, you can go back to look at something you weren't sure about. You hear a line, you say, wait a second, you can back it up and listen to it again. Like in a book, you can turn a page back, look at it. Now, again, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I can't help myself because it's interesting to me. Tell me what your favorite audiobook is.
Ooh, favorite ever. I still am a big fan of The Big Leap. I don't know
Oh,
why that one just changed that one was just like it's always my go-to. But they're all like podcasting, how to profit from your I am a personal development and podcast and business junkie. Someday I'll have a series or I don't know, maybe I'll read for pleasure someday, but I haven't gotten there yet.
well, yeah, I mean, you also don't have to do everything, Jen. You can do some things that you like and don't have to beat yourself up about that. Well, I think it's fantastic that you've created this podcast, particularly because I think a lot of podcasters are subject to that pod fade.
Mhm.
And it's challenging. It's challenging. And if I can be of any value to your listeners, today I'm going to hopefully give them some stuff that they can use right now, today. I know that it sounds like almost all your listeners are podcasters themselves, and that a lot of them are struggling to make their podcasts generate revenue.
Yeah.
And I'm going to I'm going to relate everything to my own peculiar world perspective, and I invite anyone listening who doesn't like me, just ignore me. If I say something that you just think, "Oh, that guy's crazy," then it's all right. But all of it is based on my real life experience of seeing these things and then using them. There's a fundamental principle I espouse in Wilson method, which is you have to ask for what you want. Now, I know this seems so simple.
Mhm.
Well, you clearly are onto the fact that it is not as simple as it sounds.
No.
But
But
many, many important and really profound tools, I think, in all kinds of things in life appear simple. And that's sometimes why they're challenging or puzzling, because people go, I can't do it. It's so simple. I can't do it. Well, sometimes you just need someone to show you the pathway or say, oh, like this or like that. And then suddenly it's so easy. Do you know the actress Katie Sagal?
I've heard the name.
Yeah, she was originally, I think she became most famous for Married with Children. She played the mom, Peg Bundy, on that. But then she's been in Sons of Anarchy, and she's in Futurama as a voice actor as the Cyclops woman. And Katie's all over the place. I mean, Katie can do anything, and she's incredible. But I've known her since before she was famous. And when she hit big with Married with Children, I remember this so clearly. I was at a party, I want to say like a Christmas party at her house in Los Angeles. And the only reason I remember this is because it was on the Beverly Glen, which is a narrow, curving, winding street with no parking. And I had to park like a mile away and walk to her house. But everyone there was excited, and she was really exploding, and it was great. It was a big thing. And we were talking now, I'll tell you something about her. Even people listening who may know her, tell you something they don't know. She's a fantastic actress. She can do comedy, she can do drama, she can do anything. Really can. But what a lot of people don't know is she has an unbelievable singing voice.
Wow.
Yeah, she sings. Now, when I knew her when she was very young, particularly folks around blues, R&B, just unbelievable. And I'll never forget, at this party, we were talking, and I was saying, this is so great and so many opportunities. And she said, I realized I made a big mistake. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I just thought since the show was popular and everything was blowing up, that they would offer me things for that I could do for singing and stuff like that. She said, but they didn't. And it's like they just think of me now as actress. Now, I don't think she's in any way unhappy about her life. She's had extraordinary success, and I think she's enormously grateful for all of it. But that night, she said to me, I really should have asked them. I really should have said, can you do? And it made such an impact on me because I went away thinking, wow, I would have made the same mistake. I would have thought, well, of course, they can see that I'm a singer. And so I think this is a fundamental issue with podcasting and making them profitable. You have to ask for what you want. And if what you want is to generate revenue from your podcast, then you're going to have to make some kind of offer of something. It might be, and please, you're much more the expert in this than I am. So I'm only approaching it from the point of view of my expertise at communication. The actual strategies, and of course, I would love to talk with you if you want, or maybe another entire podcast. I don't know. But you might offer someone a subscription to your podcast. My guess is you probably have to have quite a few listeners before you want to do that. But maybe not. Maybe you have free podcasts that are 20-minute or 30-minute episodes, but the people who join your paid membership, and that might be a couple dollars a month. I don't know. Maybe $2, $3 a month. Not a big deal. Less than the cup of coffee you buy at Starbucks. But if you sign up for that special thing, you hear the full extended version of the podcast. And you may have some fascinating episodes with somebody where the 20-minute version is sort of a juicy chunk of it that has some exciting stuff, but it leaves us wanting to know more. That's one most obvious way. But there are many other ways. For example, depending what your podcast is about, suppose your podcast is about cooking. And I just pulled that out of thin air. It could be a specific kind of food, or it could be cooking in general. But you might talk sometimes about different kitchen tools that you use. Well, you might have a thing on your website where if you've listened to the podcast and you heard me talking about using a certain kind of egg timer or a certain kind of pan that go to my website and you can buy that exact tool that I talked about.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just throwing out things as they come to mind, but the key behind all of them is genuinely asking for what you want. And Jen, well, before the pandemic lockdown, I was going to say, I did a lot of live events where I would do a 2-day boot camp of Wilson method training. And it's limited to just 10 people. I'm actually starting them again. I'm going to be doing a couple this year, but it's just limited to 10 people because it's very immersive. And the reason I call it a boot camp is I don't just lecture you. We learn things and then I make you get up and do them. I make you actually like at a real military boot camp. I want you going through these paces so that you feel what it actually feels like. And I think one of the great values of this boot camp mine is if while you're doing it, you say, oh, I don't understand this. Well, you're right there with me in a very small group. So I'm able to help everyone with very intensive hands-on attention in that way. But it's funny, in boot camp, sometimes I will ask them at the very beginning of the first day, I'll ask them to go around the group and I'll give them an imaginary thing that they're supposed to ask for. And it could be anything. I might say, you're in your boss's office asking for a raise. And it's the most extraordinary thing because people say, as if they're talking to us, well, boss, I want you to know I've been here 5 years and I feel like I'm one of the hardest working people here. And I feel like my contribution is extremely valuable. There are other people who don't work as hard as I do. And they'll go through all the stuff. And then at the end, I'll say, okay, so did you feel you asked for a raise? And they'll say, oh, yes. And I'll say, I didn't hear that. I heard you talking about your feelings and that you were valuable and that the company was better off with you there. Yeah, I heard all that. But I didn't hear you say, I really need to get paid more. How much can you raise my salary? Now I know that to some people, and I know that sometimes people think women are more prone to this. I don't know if they are. I think men are also prone to this. I think it may be more a personality thing more than anything. But there are a lot of people feel like, oh, I couldn't do that. That's too aggressive. But it doesn't have to be aggressive. It can be extremely friendly. If you, for example, again, I'm making this up. I don't know individual cases, but if you were asking a boss for a raise and you could say, oh, well, my department last year brought in 20% more revenue than any other department. And that was because of me. And I say that because I was the head of this project and this project. And then you asked me specifically to take care of this. And that's where we made so much more money. So you can see that I'm extremely valuable to this company. And I don't want to leave this company, but I do need to get paid more money. So you and I should put our heads together and figure out exactly how much, because I'd like to stay at this job for the rest of my life. I don't want to go anywhere else. I love you. I love the people here. I love what we do. So that I don't think sounds aggressive. I don't think so. But it's funny as I hear myself saying it, I'm calling into account a couple of other Wilson method principles. And that is, empathy is so important when we're asking for things. And that may be the thing that makes the difference between it sounding too harsh or too aggressive and really friendly. My experience has been that if you give tremendous value to people, like you do, Jen Dragonette, you give tremendous value to people, the natural human inclination is to want to return the favor.
Yeah.
Is to say, what can I do for you? And if you say, oh, I'd really like an iced tea, then someone says, oh, I can do that. And they run to get you an iced tea, but it could be anything. Oh, I need help packing these boxes. Oh, I can do that. And that's it's a very different interaction than if you just storm in cold and say, give me your dough. I mean, it has a very different feeling. And that idea of having empathy for what other people may be going through. And this again is, I said I was going to give your people some valuable stuff they could use right here. I'm hoping some of the stuff I'm giving is not too esoteric, but empathy, we must not confuse it. It's not sympathy. Empathy is not feeling sorry for people or thinking we know how they feel. It's trying to imagine how other people feel. It's trying to put ourselves in their shoes. Because if we do that, suddenly we've changed the dynamic of our interactions with them. Suddenly we're not on opposing sides. We're not adversarial. We're on the same side. We're on the same team.
Yeah.
You might even say we're friends. And that has such a powerful shift to the level of communication. But let me, as I'm thinking, as I'm hearing myself, let me give some concrete things for your people. I think of, now I know that a lot of podcasts now have a video component. People are putting stuff up on YouTube. And I think that's great too. But some of them still are audio only. So we want to be able to maximize the vocal affect. That is another way of saying the color and texture that our voice brings to the proceedings. You saw me jump immediately, Jen, when you used the word tsunami, because I'm listening for that kind of stuff. Well, let's take two things here that your people can do immediately. One is active listening. And if there's any format that begs for it, it's podcasting. We really want to listen carefully because sometimes we think someone's going to say something and then it turns out they're saying the opposite, or they take a sudden left turn and it's something completely different. And our ability to respond to that in real time authentically is, I think it may be the number one thing that makes a podcast engaging. Because, and this again, this is a little counterintuitive. I think sometimes people think, oh no, it makes me seem amateurish. Quite the contrary. It makes you seem very human, which is very desirable.
Yeah.
We've had enough of Chat GPT, okay? We've had enough of the Terminator and every other robot who's infested our dreams. We don't need any more robotic interaction. We want human interaction. And I'll tell your listeners here an incredibly valuable piece of information. So simple. If you make a mistake, if you use the wrong word, if you hiccup, if anything happens that you think is less than professional, that's the stuff that makes people connect with you because they think, oh, I do that. I've said magnanimous when I meant to say magnificent. I used the wrong word. One of the things that I've seen superstars do, I saw this for years, and it had a big impression on me. When they make those mistakes now, they don't necessarily do this if it's like a live broadcast or something, but in their personal interactions with people, both personal and business, if they make a mistake like that, they immediately own it. They say, oh my God, I just said this word. That's not what I meant. I don't know what I was thinking. I meant to say blah, blah, blah. That endears people to you. When you're self-effacing like that, I'll tell you another bizarre story. It's not bizarre, but it's just, I never imagined in a million years. One of the very first jobs I ever got in Las Vegas, there was a woman who's a superstar at that time and now is older, but no less wonderful in my heart, named Anne Margaret. And she was in Bye Bye Birdie, and she was with Elvis and Viva Las Vegas, and she was in Carnal Knowledge, and she's fantastic. She saw me on some TV show and had Caesar's Palace call me and say she wants you to open for her in Caesar's Palace. It's great. So I went out the first time I was ever working in Las Vegas. It's fantastic. But I knew I wasn't going to say anything, but just a few years before, she had been in a horrible accident up in Lake Tahoe. On stage, she had fallen off a platform about 15 feet onto her face. Oof. And had terrible injuries. They had to life flight her out of Tahoe down to LA. I mean, it was, yeah. And they had to essentially reassemble this incredibly beautiful woman. Her face had to be reassembled like a jigsaw puzzle, sort of. And her makeup artist kind of created a makeup to compensate for certain flaws on stage. Now, I knew about this. I wasn't going to say anything. But a couple nights, maybe 2 or 3 nights into the run, one of the people came and said, oh, there's going to be a party upstairs in the suite and they want to invite you. And I said, oh, thanks. Okay, yeah. And then, I don't know, after the second show, I was just getting changed and stuff. And there was a knock at the door. I go and open the door. There's Anne Margaret with her hair up in a towel and not a lick of makeup on, wearing like a sweatshirt and jeans, I guess. And there was this horrible scar running from her hairline down through her eyebrow, across the bridge of her nose, across her cheek. And when I saw that, I just thought, well, this woman has me in her hip pocket now forever. That she would be so self-effacing that she doesn't want to put on makeup or put her hair up to come. And of course, what was she coming to my dressing room? She said, oh, I want to make sure you knew about the party later. I said, yeah. She said, well, we really want to make sure you're going to be there. I said, you're the big star. You're not supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to send some assistant. She said, well, we just really want to make sure. She could not have been nice. She was so sweet and so down to earth. That kind of self-effacing behavior, that welds people to you for life. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for her to this day. It's been years since I've seen her, but there isn't anything I wouldn't do. And it's that kind of thing. It's like when you show that you're human, that you're just a regular person. And I know that there's some people in entertainment now who don't follow this philosophy. never want to be seen except in full hair and makeup, and they never want to be seen as anything except perfect. Well, I mean, to each their own. But for my money, we we crave that experience of feeling like we're actually talking to a real person,
Yeah.
and that that person isn't afraid to let us see who they are. Yeah, I just burped on camera. Okay, so what? You know? So I burped. And then everyone who burps, who's watching, goes, "Yeah, me too. I do that too. I
Yeah.
I stumbled over my words. I got confused. I looked at the wrong camera, whatever it may be." But when it comes to podcasting, boy, this is one powerful thing you can do right now. And of course, active listening is what started me down this rabbit hole, because there was a very famous Academy Award winning actor who I was good friends with, Carl Malden, who was in Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront with Brando and all these films. And again, just a down to earth, lovely guy. And one time I asked him, I said, "Carl, I've seen you in all these films. You're always great. You're always different. You never make a false move." I said, "It's incredible." And I knew that he had been on Broadway with Marlon Brando in Streetcar Named Desire for years. I said to him, "Can you tell the difference between a good actor and a bad actor?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's easy." He said, "A good actor is listening to you like they've never heard anything like this before in their life." And he said, "Streetcar, we did for 2 years or maybe more. We did hundreds of performances. We knew what the next line was going to be. But a good actor is listening like they've never heard this before." He said, "A bad actor is just waiting for when it's their turn to talk." Boy, does that sum that up. But one thing your listeners can do right now is to practice that active listening, to really listen closely. And part of active listening is responding in a way that shows you really heard the person, what they said.
Yeah.
That if they said, "I'm really afraid of heights," then instead of you just rambling on about something, you might say something like, "Did you have an experience where you fell? Were you at a..." Now, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but that tiny response is so powerful. The other person hears that you really saw them, you really heard them and saw them. And I also said I'll give your listeners here's a very valuable thing that you can start doing today. You can even practice. I was mentioning about vocal affect, and that is all the different layers and nuances of our voice. And you can hear sometimes I'm lowering my voice where I'm almost whispering. Sometimes my voice is stronger. But that's just the beginning of it. There's a lot of different layers where sometimes I'm a little bit more conversational. Maybe at some point I'm a little bit more confessional. Sometimes I might sound polarized. By that quality, that ability is very easy to do. Anyone can do it. I'm going to give you an exercise right now that you can start doing immediately and is actually fun and funny. But I just want to say the reason that I think it's disappearing is because of technology, because of things like email and text, and where people aren't using their voices. And so, like anything else, you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And so, as crazy as this sounds, I'm going to give all your people an exercise I call Eggs Benedict.
Yum.
It is, well, it does sound delicious, doesn't it?
It does.
It does sound delicious. Well, here's what's so fun. Eggs Benedict began as a game with my son when he was 4 years old. Now, he certainly didn't have Eggs Benedict for me. So I don't know. He must have heard it on a TV show. I don't know where he heard it. And I don't even remember exactly how the game started. But the game was he would be standing in front of the mirror and I would give him a different feeling or emotion or point of view or attitude. And he would say the words Eggs Benedict using that point of view. So if I said, "This is the greatest thing you've ever heard," he'd say, "Eggs Benedict." Now, seeing a 4-year-old do this made me laugh so hard. And again, I don't know where he learned to do this stuff, but it was hysterical. I'd say, "Suspicious." And he'd say, "Eggs Benedict." And I'd say, "Furious, angry." He'd say, "Eggs Benedict." Now, the point of this is that the words don't matter. And that's why we use Eggs Benedict. Now, my son is such a character. Now, he himself cooks Eggs Benedict himself. I came in one night about midnight into the kitchen, and he was there, and he seemed upset. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "My hollandaise sauce has broken." And I thought, wow. I said, "I don't even know how to make a hollandaise sauce." I said, "That's very impressive. I'm going back to sleep." But the point of Eggs Benedict is to take some either words that don't matter or nonsensical words and practice looking at yourself or recording yourself on your phone or a camera, saying them with different, very powerful emotions: sad, happy, angry, jealous, fearful. You can go on and on and on. And what's interesting about it is everybody thinks they're doing everything much bigger than they really are. My experience has been that if you look at yourself and play yourself back on video, you'll be surprised. It's not nearly as big as you thought it was. Again, it's just exercising this muscle.
Yeah.
So that it's limber. And the it I'm referring to, of course, is your vocal quality. It has great elasticity. It can be big, it can be small, it can be gentle, it can be harsh. All those kinds of things are bringing to your podcast what used to be called the theater of the mind. Now, if we're watching you on YouTube, nothing wrong with that. We can see you. But I always think it's much more interesting. I like to download podcasts and listen to them while I'm driving. I like to listen to them sometimes when I'm exercising at the gym. I like to hear just the audio because I can really concentrate on it. And you're creating an entire world in someone's imagination with just your voice. And since it doesn't cost anything, I'm not saying that you have to go out and buy a new Lamborghini or something like that. You can practice it all the time. You can practice it every day. But Jen, forgive me. I feel like I've rambled on and on and on. I haven't given you a chance to get a word in edgewise, but you just sort of started me down this road, and I was thinking all this stuff. Let me try to zip my lip for a moment and let you talk.
I just want to reiterate some of the things you said because there's so many things. We started the conversation and it was about like asking for what you want, using your voice to what you want. And I think as you've gone through with that empathy and like I forget what the word was, but I'm going to call it tonality because that's all I know. Like that's the word that I can remember
it is
right
tonality.
now.
Yes.
That it makes a big difference. And I think that for podcasters specifically, like some of how you went through some of the stories of like asking for a raise. Well, that's like our ask at the end of our episode. What do you want them to do? I struggle with this when it's like powerful, powerful. Here's this tool. Here's this. Here's this. Here's my offer.
Right.
And it's like, I love my offer. It's so beneficial, but when it comes to that ask part, it's like, here, I'm giving, I'm giving, I'm giving. This receive part is like, I'm going to talk to you like this. I'm going to like
Right,
tone it
right.
down. And I see so much of like what you're saying in the podcast world, in my clients, in myself, that this communication piece, it's a confidence piece, but there's also a way, like you were saying, my difference between a ripple and a tsunami, painting the image. If we can figure out a way to tell that story, to engage and to use this as like literally a way to communicate in a way that keeps the listener wanting more. Oh, there's nothing
Absolutely.
worse than a monotone podcast.
Oh
Like
my God.
there's nothing worse.
Well,
No
no, wait.
offense to those that are out there.
I take it back, Jen. Sometimes, if you want to go to sleep,
Okay.
if you listen to one of those podcasts that's monotone, it can knock you right out like
That's true.
Novocaine. But aside from that, now let me ask you something crazy, Jim. Tell me, what is your offer?
Well, I'm actually, as you were talking, you're like, you don't have to spend all that money on the producer and the editor and the manager. That's actually my job. I have a studio called Dragonette Productions, and I do full service audio production. And then I coach people how to use podcasting as a healing modality. And my
Oh,
offer
fantastic.
is again, it depends on where I'm leading people, but my favorite offer is my membership because I love getting podcasters in there and like, let's find out what's really blocking you. Like, why aren't you having success? I can almost guarantee you it is the fear in there. And that's what makes me different because I see the fear and I help you through that instead of just giving you a damn strategy because it doesn't work.
Absolutely right. I hope that people listening didn't gloss over what you just said there, because that is one of the problems of today's modern technological society, that some people think all the solutions are just strategies. If we don't really understand what's going on, it's sort of like trying to learn a foreign language by rote. I can learn to say "Como se llama," but if I haven't had a real Spanish speaking teacher help me learn the language, sometimes I'm a little bit like a parrot or a chimpanzee or something. And what you just said, I think, is extremely powerful. That almost all of our problems in podcasting come from our fears. And a lot of those fears have to do with us being self conscious. And they all come from the critic outside. That's and for everybody, it may be different. It may be a parent, it may be a mom, it may be a dad, it might be a teacher, could be it, but you're picturing them looking over your shoulder going, who do you think you are? You Who gave you permission to do a podcast? Well, I have great news for you. You don't need permission to do a podcast. You need a microphone. Now, just as an interesting experiment that we could always edit out if you don't like it, Jen, I say, let's work on your offer right here for a moment. Let's work on your ask, because what you're offering is extremely valuable. And anyone listening to this podcast regularly can hear the vocal tonality, as you called it, or affect, they're the same, in your voice. So the difference between working with Jen and not is a step up in professionalism. Does that sound fair?
Professionalism. I laugh because I'm like, I do not see myself as professional at all.
Well,
I'm good at what I do, but you better be ready for some fun. Like,
but that's a really interesting thing you just said, because of course it should be fun. What else are we here for if we're not going to have fun? My God, this is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. This is the whole deal. But you're thinking, well, because I'm having fun, it's not really professional. But you said it yourself. You're really good at what you do.
that's true.
And it's only that outside critic who's saying, Jen Dragonette, oh, you're going to coach people? Oh, you're going to be, well, the answer to that is always yes. Yes, I am. And not only am I going to coach people, but I'm going to help people. And that is big. That's a very big deal. And so I don't mean to put you on the spot like that, but maybe the next time you actually make your official offer, you'll think about, in Wilson Method, I sometimes talk about 3 Ds, and that is to determine, define, and deploy. I want you to determine your goal before you begin your communication. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to go in and wing it. Well, people who wing it are gunslingers, and gunslingers die young. We don't want to die young. Then, 2, define it is defining the means of transmission of your communication, because you and I are talking on Zoom now. Well, that's one means of transmission. But if we were communicating via email, or if we were face to face, or if we were texting, or if we're on the phone speak, all of those are different. All of them require different approaches. And the 3rd D is to deploy the tools that you learn in Wilson Method. So I think this would be a great experiment for fun for you to think about the next time before you do an offer, before you make that offer again, for you to take a moment and make a list of all the incredible value that you really offer. Now, I'll tell you a secret, and I can't tell you who taught me this because I can't remember now at this late date. Sometimes the way to silence that outside critic is to trick them, is to say, I'm not writing down a list of Jen Dragonette's value. I'm writing about somebody else. And that could be anyone. You can make up a person. But when you start to think that you're writing about yourself, there's a part of your brain that's just thinking, oh, what's someone else going to think when they read this? Oh my God, you're such an egotist. Oh my God, you're so conceited. Oh my God. Right. So you're talking about someone else. But I can see very clearly how much value you have to offer people. So I want you to make a list, number it, of the things that you're giving them, that you're offering them, so that then you can look at it and really honestly appreciate, oh my God, this is a lot of stuff. So that when you make an offer, what your offer really is, would you like me to take you by the hand and lead you to the next level? All the other specific stuff that you really do is real, and that's real stuff. But what your offer is really about is, I have vast experience in this. I have practical experience from having done it, but I also have technical experience in terms of how I record you, how I make you sound, because professional podcasters, if you use a mixing board, if you use some of the software, you can clean the sound up, make it sound so much better, right? Well, it doesn't mean you have to do that. But if you want to go to the next level, if you've been doing this for a year or two and you're still struggling trying to make money at it, let me take your hand. I'm not going to throw a bunch of strategy and then, well, good luck, and kick you out the door.
No.
I'm going to take you by the hand and walk you through this step by step. And when we get to the other side, all of this stuff will be imparted to you.
Yep.
Now, tell me if that offer sounds more appealing.
Oh yeah.
So
100%.
I just try it. I mean, again, the beautiful part of all this broadcasting is it cost us nothing to experiment with things. You saw that headline on the wilsonmethod.com website that said, "Stop the bleeding." And I'm so tickled that you mentioned it because it just gave me confirmation. I said, yeah, somebody feels the same way I do.
Yeah.
So by all means, we want to try that stuff. And I'll tell you this, I've spoken to so many people. This is the craziest thing. Again, this seems counterintuitive, but I've spoken to so many people who say that if they listen to some podcast and there isn't an offer, they feel kind of let down. They feel somehow like they can't quite verbalize what it is. They feel a little depressed or like they missed something. Well, of course you do. Just because someone makes an offer, it doesn't mean that you're trying to browbeat people into purchasing whatever you have. It means the word offer. Here it is. Sometimes people will say to me, I can always tell, sometimes there's people who desperately want to train with me, but are trying to talk themselves out of it. They're just saying, this is crazy. I know how to talk. I don't need somebody to help me with it. And they'll say, why do you feel like I need to have you as a trainer? And they're surprised because I'll go, you don't. I couldn't be more clear about this. You absolutely don't. Everything I teach in Wilson Method is simple, it works, and anybody can do it. You don't need me. You could spend 10, 15, 20 years learning the hard way, the way I did, trial and error. And all I have to offer, I think, is I can shorten that learning curve for you. I can save you years of time. That's all. But if somebody tells you they're the only way you can get ahead, I put my hand on my wallet.
Run.
Yeah, I'd run the other direction. That's very suspicious, very suspicious. And when someone makes you an offer, it's the same as if you're at a party and they say, would you like an hors d'oeuvre? They're not saying you have to take an hors d'oeuvre or else you're a bad person. They're trying to be a gracious host. Here are all these fantastic things. You might want to sample some of this. You might be interested in this. That's all it means.
Yeah. Ooh, so many things there. So where can people find the Wilson Method, find you? Like, okay, we've had these great conversations. We are talking about communication, how to land those offers, and you are truly there to stop the bleeding. I want my listeners to know where to find you. Like, how can they get hold of you?
Well, that's a really good question when you say how to get a hold of me, because I would encourage people, anyone who has any question is always welcome to email me at larry@wilsonmethod.com, because I read every single one. And I think you probably know from listening just in this episode, I really do listen. People who want to know more about the training, they can go to thewilsonmethod.com, and there's a bunch of stuff. But let's do something better than that, Jen Dragonette. Let's do something better. I'm going to torture my poor IT fellow. I'm going to make him make a special page for your people.
Okay.
If you're interested in, I'm just about to roll out online training for Wilson Method. As I mentioned, I'm doing 2-day boot camp a couple times this year. I think one in Los Angeles, I think one in Reno. I have to check on that. But if people are interested in learning more about this stuff, I'm gonna make my guy put up some other stuff for your people too. If they go to thewilsonmethod.com /Jen, JENN, 2 N's,
Mm-hmm.
JENN. There'll be some special stuff there. There'll be a lot of free stuff. If you're interested in actually training with me, I'm going to put a massive discount on the online training, like 50% off, because I'll know what's coming through this podcast if you come through that page. Yeah. And then, of course, they can always listen to my podcast, which is How to Talk to Humans,
Woo, woo.
which is available, I guess, wherever podcasts are available. It seems to be on all the platforms.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited that you're a podcaster and that you're bringing this to this platform, because truly, I think that, I don't know, there's nothing better than podcasting for healing and for communicating and for letting go of all those other people's visions and the world's visions and being able to be yourself. I feel like this is the true place to be unrestricted.
You are absolutely right. I have to say, I think you may be the first person I've heard to actually say it. Sometimes other people have kind of tiptoed around, but you really put your finger on it. And it also makes me think, of course, maybe the ideal that we're hoping to achieve is to be able to generate revenue from our podcast. Maybe it would be great if some people are listening who are thinking, wow, I wish I could just do a podcast and be able to quit my job. I think that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it happens in a stroke of lightning. I
No.
think it probably happens step by step. And my guess is you would do well to take Jen up on her offer, because it sounds like she can take you by the hand and walk you through that. But even, I'll say this, even if you aren't making money off your podcast, I think the message that Jen is saying here is so important, that it is healing. And by God, the price is right. It's free. And I can't imagine that your experience, Jen, is any different than anyone else I've met in podcasting, that you wind up connecting with people you never imagined in a million years.
Yeah. 100%. That's part of my story and part of my why, is that podcasting actually saved my life. If podcasting wasn't around, I probably wouldn't be here today. So podcasting has been such a huge impact. And I think exactly what you're talking about is there is that piece that we have to learn to communicate all the pieces, including the ask.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I hope no one listening thinks I'm being dismissive of that. Asking for what you want is hard. I understand. It is hard. But it's a funny thing, because when you break through, you realize, well, there's nothing there. There's no reason I could. No, there isn't. It's only fear. That's all it is fear.
Yep.
And I'm told, I don't know if this is true. I've always heard that in days have gone by with circuses where they had elephants, they would control them. They would tie a piece of string around their leg and then tie it to a stake, a little stake that was in the ground that obviously couldn't hold them. But it's almost like the elephant didn't realize it couldn't hold them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like all of us are subject to this. I'm going to give away my age. I didn't mean to, but I just thought of an Eagles song called Already Gone. There's a line and it goes, so oftentimes it happens that we live our lives in chains and we never even realized we have the key. I'm sure there's a metaphor that other people must talk about a bird in a cage and the door is wide open. It's that same thing. We can all make offers, and you can make different levels of offers. You can have a small offer and a medium offer and a really big offer, because there are some people listening to your podcast and it's just a matter of personalities. There may be someone listening, they're only interested in the very biggest offer.
Yep.
If you have 3 different kinds of offer, they're not even interested in that small, medium one. They only want the very biggest one.
Yep.
Okay. Let's give them what they want.
Yep. And pull out that little steak.
Yeah, exactly. Pull out that little steak, take a look and go, hey, this is a tiny piece of string. You can't hold me back with this. There's nothing holding me back. It's all in my imagination. I have to say, Jen, I'm very pleased. And I guess at some other time, maybe you and I will talk again. I would like to very much. But I hope sometime to learn more about your story. I'm glad that somehow you found podcasting.
Yeah.
I think you're providing something very valuable.
Yeah.
Very valuable.
It's a game changer, that's for sure. Between my 2 podcasts, this one and then my other one that is all self-love based. I found my jam. I love being behind the microphone and giving myself and the world a voice.
It's great. It's really great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of your wisdom, all of this. I mean, there's so much here. I'm so excited about that offer. I definitely will have it all in the show notes for our listeners to make it easy, because we're all creatures of ease. We like to click the button. So that will all be there. So if somebody were to walk away with just that one thing that they took for a minute, a moment, or a lifetime, what would you want them to walk away with?
Well, I didn't mean to get this heavy, but I will. We talked about empathy. We talked about trying to imagine how other people feel. When we do that, we realize we're not adversaries. We're allies. We're on the same team. And I think if we look at it in a big enough context, you realize that all of us are on the same team. Even those who we think we're wildly in disagreement with. Maybe about something. Some people like chocolate, some people like vanilla, some people like strawberry. But ultimately, I think the sooner you can come to that understanding, and it may not be permanent. It's not like it's a raincoat you're putting on. It may be flickering like lightning. You may feel it for a moment like, oh, we are all part of it, and then it may go away. But even if it's just momentary, I think that might be the most important thing.